Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Las Vegas. I'm Karin Metcalf. I use she, her pronouns. And in your order of service, it will mention Joanne Leovy, who also uses she, her pronouns. However, she's not here. The hurricane in Florida has called her away. For those of you that don't know, she's a medical doctor. And in her retirement, this is one of the fun things that she does. She responds to national and international emergencies. But she will be joining us pre-recorded in some instances where we have been able to do that. So on her behalf, I welcome you as well. It's wonderful to be together, both virtual and in person. We broadcast a video feed for our virtual attendees. So if you wish not to be recorded, please sit toward the back or on the sides of the sanctuary. After this service today, we will be having a child dedication, which is the Unitarian Universalist rite of passage to welcome a new member of the community. After the child dedication, we hope you'll join us for our coffee hour in the room adjacent to this one right here. Members of the congregation place a few dollars in the basket to cover the cost of coffee hour, but you, if you're new here, are our guest and don't need to do that. When we come together, we practice creating a reverent and inclusive space. At the same time, we welcome the need to move around because bodies are welcome, all bodies are welcome here.
The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Las Vegas is situated on the traditional homelands of the Leovy Southern Paiute people. We are grateful for the land itself and for those who have stewarded it for generations. We encourage everyone present here to engage in continued learning about the indigenous peoples who have worked and lived on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Mawapa Band of Paiutes. When we gather together, we light the chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The chalice reminds us that we are connected to a much larger religious tradition that stretches out of the past, reaches around the world, and leans into our shared future. Now together, we light the chalice as a reminder that we are a beacon in the desert. May its light lead the way to love, acceptance, and justice as we strive for personal and societal transformation. Let's take a moment to witness and greet each other and to acknowledge how wonderful it is to be together.
The intersection of interfaith work. We talk about intersections, for example, your race, where it crosses with gender and with your socioeconomic status in the world. But as a person of faith, there's another intersection, and we call that interfaith work. When you're new to being a Unitarian Universalist, it's not unusual to focus your energy on figuring out how you fit in this faith, in this community, in this city. But as you get used to being a Unitarian Universalist, you start to zoom out to a bigger picture of it and how it sits in the world. You become comfortable with the idea that it was built on the sources of other religions, and that it is a covenant-based religion built on 8 principles. Part of identifying as a Unitarian Universalist is to see that we have reason to move beyond these walls. We consider interfaith work a ministry, which can manifest itself through service with others, to others, for others, and ourselves. Interfaith work gives us a chance to meet and understand our religious neighbors. It's an act of welcoming, at minimum, and at best an opportunity to be in covenant with the diversity in which we exist. Here in this congregation, one of the ways we exercise social and racial justice is through our interfaith work, with our membership in a local community-based organization called Nevadans for the Common Good. You may hear the acronym NCG. That stands for Nevadans for the Common Good, which is a nonprofit community-based organization that this congregation has been a member of for the last 10 years. The mission of Nevadans for the Common Good is to develop community members to be active citizens in the democratic process in order to make our local community livable for all of us.
Please rise in body or spirit and join as you are willing and able in singing number 1010 in the teal hymnal, We Give Thanks.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this joy we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
In person, but I hope that you're having a good Sunday, and I hope you'll get comfortable on the carpet or in the chairs for just a few minutes, because I want to tell you a short story. And the story I want to tell you is about our holiday that we have this weekend. I know that some people don't have school and don't have to go to work tomorrow, and that is because we have Labor Day, a special day where we celebrate people who worked very hard so that we can all have good working conditions. And they worked for things like fair wages and a 40-hour work week and weekends and a holiday, the first Monday of September. But did you know that there were some Unitarians and Universalists who are really important in why we have Labor Day? I want to tell you about just a few of them. So I'm going to show you a picture. Back in the 1800s, that was long before the Unitarians and Universalists got together and decided that we could combine and be one religion. So back then, people were either Unitarians or Universalists. And so our first hero is this man here, Horace Greeley. He lived from 1811 till 1872, and he was a famous newspaper publisher. He was an abolitionist who fought against slavery, but he was also very important in the early labor movement. He was one of the first people that wrote in his paper and advocated for producer and worker cooperatives. He believed that not only should all people be free to do their own work, but also that workers and those who did the labor should share in the profits and should have some control over the companies. So that's Horace Greeley. Our second Unitarian Universalist hero, her name is Maria Molly Baldwin. She was a Unitarian, and she lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts from 1856 to 1922. Back in those days, a lot of people didn't think that African Americans should be working in jobs for educated people, and a lot of people thought that women shouldn't be working in any jobs at all. So she had to work for years to break down a lot of barriers to become an educator, and she eventually became a principal of a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She was the first African American female principal in the US, and she taught there and was principal there for over 40 years. She worked very hard early on in the 1800s on the cause of civil rights and women's rights. So that's Maria Molly Baldwin, an important Unitarian. And then, you know, we like to tell stories where the Unitarians and Universalists are heroes, but you know, not all Unitarians and Universalists are the good guys. So I want to tell you about a Universalist bad guy. His name is George Pullman, and he lived from 1831 till 1897. I think some of the things he did were kind of cool because I love trains, and George Pullman invented the Pullman rail car that you see here. Isn't it beautiful? I would love to take a ride in one. And George Pullman built a big town with a factory so that workers could build his rail cars. And in that town, he owned the store, and everything that they had to buy from his store. And for a while, everything went well and the workers were happy, but then there was an economic downturn, and he suddenly had to cut workers' wages over 30%, but he didn't cut the prices in the store. So all the workers in the town couldn't even afford to buy food and couldn't afford to live. And they got angry and went on strike. They went on a big strike for better wages and better working conditions and to not have to shop in George Pullman's store. And this is where George Pullman turned kind of bad, because he called up President Grover Cleveland on one of the newfangled telephones that had just been invented a little while before. And he asked President Cleveland to send Army troops out. And federal troops came out and they put down the Pullman strike, and 30 people were killed that day. What happened after that was all of America got kind of upset about this, and there were many people around the country that were very upset, and they talked to their people in Congress, and Congress suddenly went and passed Labor Day as a national holiday, and Grover Cleveland was forced to sign it. So I guess in a funny way, George Pullman, although he was kind of an enemy to laborers at the time, he helped to bring about Labor Day as well. So what I want to finish with is the idea that the work for fair working conditions and good labor conditions hasn't stopped to this day. And what I'd like to know is who sitting in the worship hall today has ever been part of a union or has worked in their workplace for better working conditions. Maybe you want to raise your hand and wave it around if that's you. I think there's a lot of us that are still involved as Unitarian Universalists in the labor movement today, so we should celebrate each other as we are celebrating Labor Day weekend. Thank you.
Community-based organizing, a social justice approach to revitalizing congregational life, written by the Unitarian Universalist Association. The Unitarian Universalist community in the 21st century seeks both to revitalize congregational life and to fulfill its spiritual mandate to pursue social, economic, and racial justice and create a better world. Congregation-based community organizing is a model of social activism that promises significant success in the ways that congregations meet their goals. At last count, in 2019, over 200 Unitarian Universalist congregations are members of congregation-based community organizations. So that's over 20% of the congregations nationwide. These networks provide training leaders and professional organizers. Again, UUCLV is one of the 50 congregations involved with a community-based group, this one supported by the Industrial Areas Foundation. They have succeeded in a wide range of actions, from securing a needed stop sign to reducing class size in a public school. The networks developed through the Industrial Areas Foundation are not single-issue organizations. They do not break up following achieving one objective. Rather, other actions are planned, and Unitarian Universalist congregations participate long-term, if not indefinitely. One of the core principles in maintaining a broad-based organization is sticking to actions that can win. We want them to win the support of the entire interfaith network. Unitarian Universalists share with people of other faiths concerns about the quality of educational systems, racism, the environment, housing, immigrant rights, public transportation, and affordable and accessible health care. There are other concerns important to you congregations that will not be addressed by congregation-based organizations, but that's part of the work. The Reverend Burton Carley, minister of First Unitarian Church in Memphis, Tennessee, called upon his congregation to do their interfaith work with these words. Congregation-based community organizing offers a means to be part of the restorative work to which people of faith are called. It also deepens and expands the possibility for us to be in right relationship with people outside of our congregations, to form, through citizen politics, a covenant that makes the many one and heals the us versus them polarization of people.
I invite you now to put yourself in a comfortable position and breathe slowly in and out. What worries, griefs, or anxieties do you hold today? Take another breath and give yourself a quiet message of love and acceptance. If you are joyful, take a moment to focus on gratitude. Now, broaden your focus to those in the congregation, here in the worship hall, and those online. Breathe a thought or prayer of love and comfort to our congregational community. Now broaden again and consider our neighbors here in the Las Vegas Valley. Some are suffering violence, isolation, and need. Breathe them a thought or prayer of love and compassion. Now widen your concentration to people around the world who face so many difficulties, and consider sending a breath of love or a prayer to all humans and all living beings. Today, we especially hold up these names from our community: Stella and the Stole family, Ann Sustick, Dan Tossig, Quinn and Blake Tanguma, Dee Widener, Marianne Kaiser. Irma, do we have anyone in the chat?
Yes, we have LaCory and Glenna.
May we hold that which is spoken and that which is kept in the silence of our hearts in love and compassion. Now, please, again, join with me in singing number 1023, Building Bridges, in the Teal hymnal. Please rise in body or spirit and join as you are willing and able. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Recently, I was talking to a friend. She's not a UU, but it was one of those conversations that most of you will recognize, and one that I, a UU and a Capricorn, am especially prone to. A conversation where we wax on about some worldly problem and the many solutions that would seem to be right under our noses if only other people were as talented in recognizing them as we are. Sound familiar? On this occasion, the topic was Las Vegas. Specifically how, unlike other places we've lived and visited, Vegas isn't very neighborly. It doesn't have real neighborhoods like Philly, Boston, and New York. We just have fake subdivisions with fake Italian words evoking fake luxury or greenery. I've lived in my home here for 22 years, and I know many of my neighbors by name, know their families and maybe their dogs. I've gathered at a few block parties and barbecues and even helped some of them out a little from time to time. But I can't say that I deeply know any of my neighbors or feel very bonded to them. Ours is a relationship of proximity, not purpose. Perhaps some of you have the same experience where you live. And in a time when even our Surgeon General is warning of an epidemic of loneliness, this place that doesn't seem to have a deep commitment to cultivating neighbors and neighborhoods tends to be isolating and might even be unhealthy. So why don't I get deeper with my neighbors? In part, I often think that they're too different from me, politically or in terms of interests, values, and priorities. I think, I'm not sure I want to hear more from them, and I don't feel like becoming vulnerable enough for them to hear from me. And yet, another part of me yearns to know and understand exactly those people who might be different by generation, upbringing, language, life experience, or struggle. Those who might have different beliefs, values, perspectives, and priorities. So, what if I could join a neighborhood here that has intentionality and purpose? One with a diversity of culture, experience, and belief, where we can be curious and respectful about one another. And because I'm a Capricorn UU, it would be best if we could all work at something too. Speaking of work, we're talking on this Labor Day weekend about building neighborliness through organizing, and in particular through community-based organizations. It turns out that community-based organizations are really all about building meaningful and durable relationships among neighbors who might normally not get deep with one another. Since 1940, the Industrial Areas Foundation has worked place by place to build coalitions of multi-faith and multi-purpose groups that work to discern oppression in their communities and dismantle barriers to human thriving. UUCLV has been a member of our community-based organization, Nevadans for the Common Good, or NCG, since its founding 10 years ago. Together, we've worked on addressing needs of the least among us: sex trafficking victims, elders needing meals and transportation, people lacking immigration documentation, students sitting in classes with long-term subs and not learning, recipients of payday loans with their usurious terms, and, of course, housing vulnerable people and those with substance use and mental health disorders. Several ingredients go into the secret sauce that makes community-based organizing work. Most of them are in the category of things you probably learned in kindergarten but might have kind of forgotten. Things like embracing your story and telling it honestly and with vulnerability. Deep, intentional listening while reserving judgment. Understanding that power does not come down as lightning from the mountaintop, but rather that power is built from consistency, reliability, research and learning, and maintaining relationships from the ground up. Importantly, a value is not necessarily seeking consensus, but rather building on common ground where it already exists among members. What are issues that we all agree are important and worth the work? What are solutions that might unite rather than divide the community? These principles of intentional listening, storytelling, building power, and building on common ground are common to most grassroots organizing efforts. I volunteer in a climate action group with several other members here, and that group has many of the same values and methods. When we think about the U.S. civil rights movement, it's easy to celebrate and focus on the sacrifices of its heroes: Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and the UU's Viola Liuzzo and James Reed, and rightly so. Yet, these leaders didn't just suddenly spring up and change the world out of nowhere. Author Charles Payne, in his book, I've Got the Light of Freedom, writes extensively about the volunteer army of trained organizers who spread across the South with one conversation and one small meeting at a time for over 10 years until the movement finally caught fire. That was grassroots organizing at its best. And did you know that the American labor movement actually started during U.S. colonial days in the 1760s? It took about 150 years of piecemeal, deep organizing and small strikes to bring about the progressive labor successes of the early 20th century that allow us to celebrate Labor Day. So, what about us here at UUCLV? Why should we engage? Well, first, I think that working within a religiously diverse coalition like NCG provides us an opportunity to practice most of our principles. Though I'm an atheist, I try to bow my head and open my heart to an opening prayer in a meeting. What a way to practice acceptance and try to tap into my own spiritual growth. In a house meeting, I might listen to concerns of others and consider what elements of the stories we might hold up for action. What an opportunity for discerning the right of conscience and practicing small d democracy. And is there a better way to live into compassion, valuing human dignity, and seeking equity and justice than to have an ongoing relationship with an organization dedicated to just those goals? Second, and quite practically, Working within a coalition gives us far more power than we could exert on our own as a smallish congregation with many competing priorities. At this time in our congregational life, a core of hardworking volunteers has kept our monthly food pantry running smoothly for several years, and I know we're planning a presence of pride again this year. Thank you to all you volunteers who put your values to work. But in reality, we haven't had many other consistent long-view social justice actions in recent years. Does it not make sense to plug into an existing structure that requires only relatively little work from each member organization? Third, the Unitarian Universalist Association focuses on the benefits of participating with a community-based organization for us, UU congregations and our members. In addition to building deeper relationships with each other and members of other faith traditions, we can learn new leadership skills such as public speaking, running an effective meeting, selecting a winnable issue, and holding one another accountable. Such involvement has given UU congregations a heightened community profile and actually increased lay leader involvement in congregational work as well. Because lots of activities occur outside of Sunday mornings, it gives newcomers and new people a different time and a different way to engage. Finally, in my view, the community-based organization process is quintessentially UU, non-dogmatic, bottom-up, and flexible. As an example of what I mean, William Easterly wrote a 2006 book called White Man's Burden that we studied during an NCG meeting. He writes about the many failures of foreign aid in alleviating poverty in low-income countries, but there's a relationship to what we're talking about with organizing here in our country. He points out two very different kinds of helpers, planners and seekers. He says, a planner thinks he already knows all the answers. He thinks of poverty as a technical engineering problem that his answers will solve. A seeker admits he doesn't know the answers in advance. He believes that poverty is a complicated tangle of political, social, historical, institutional, and technological factors. A seeker hopes to find answers to individual problems by trial and error experimentation. A planner believes outsiders know enough to impose solutions. A seeker believes that only insiders have enough knowledge to find solutions, and that most solutions must be homegrown. Seems like seekers are actually the opposite of the know-it-alls like my friend and me in that conversation about Las Vegas. Yet, I think we UUs aspire to be seekers, to live into a vision of our best selves. We, who care about our community here, who seek justice and equity, who seek a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, we have a golden opportunity to live our faith as seekers through engagement with community-based organizing.
To give you an overview of how Nevadans for the Common Good operates, I have a few pictures to share. There are 30 organizations that are members currently. Most of them are churches, temples, and congregations. But since NCG is a community-based organization, an agency can become a member. Most of the religious organizations join to do interfaith, social, and racial justice work, but the other agencies are there to join in the power of thousands of locals who are represented by all of these memberships. There is an executive director, Anna Ng. She is primarily paid by our organization, and she's called a lead organizer. UUCLV and all the member organizations of Nevada's for the Common Good pay dues each year. The goal is 10% of each organization's annual budget. So for example, UUCLV would pay about $1,200 this year in dues. There are also donors, individual people like me, Joanne, and other members of this congregation. And there are donors that are really big, like the local Catholic dioceses. Nevadans for the Common Good also sends Anna out to other cities because we want to develop the Industrial Areas Foundation, the national network. So, for example, she's in Reno trying to build the equivalent of what we have here. The mission of Nevadans for the Common Good, to develop community members to be active citizens in the democratic process in order to make our local community work for all of us, is generally done in 3 ways. Now, I'll tell you about the 3 ways in a minute, but I wanted to take 1 minute or moment to point out that there's something a little different nowadays than those of you that have been around for a while and have some familiarity with this. In the beginning, the first few years of this organization, we had a different lead organizer and significantly more members coming to all of the meetings in person. So we used to have to vote in person on 3 topics that we wanted to work on each year in a meeting called a delegate assembly, just to make things manageable. But when Anna joined us, just as the pandemic was starting, she had to adapt to working online. And suddenly, of course, there were significantly fewer people to work with, because the pandemic, like many parts of our lives, has really changed how much people actually want to be involved in anything. Many of the churches who used to be members of Nevadans for the Common Good are struggling to stay afloat, and therefore placing their energy inward for a time. So in today's Nevadans for the Common Good, there are basically 3 ways for the mission to be put into action. First, through legislative advocacy. Nevadans for the Common Good teaches citizens how to provide public comment on pieces of legislation that our local elected officials are considering. Once you know how to advocate for policy changes or new laws, you are free to do as you wish, but you're not representing Nevadans for the Common Good. For NCG to proclaim an issue worth the time and the energy of the whole organization, the members have to agree that the issue is in the common good. One of the finest achievements we've had legislative-wise is to completely overhaul Nevada's laws impacting sex trafficking. This was when Catholic Cortez Masto was our Attorney General. She, led by Nevadans for the Common Good, crafted the overhaul of the regulations and the criminal punishments, and Nevada became one of the country's first examples of how to address modern sex trafficking. And I believe it's what helped get Catherine Cortez Masto elected as one of our sitting senators. The most recent major legislative effort we were a part of was the creation of an ordinance to manage short-term rentals, otherwise known as Airbnb rentals. Nevadans for the Common Good worked hard to get as many members as possible to testify at public hearings, and are happy to say we got an outcome that we're proud of. As a result of the ordinance, in Clark County, you have to be actively living in a house before you rent rooms out to Airbnb, or you can only own one house where you do not live and rent it out. Now you may ask, why are short-term rentals important to social and racial justice work? It turns out a number of the Airbnb rental units was so large, it was getting to be such a problem in Las Vegas that it was directly affecting housing stock. This leads me to the second way the mission gets acted upon. Nevadans for the Common Good preaches being a good neighbor. To that end, we go out on neighborhood walks with other member organizations, knock on people's doors, and listen to people's concerns. This picture is from one of those walks, and while on it, we heard lots of complaints about the local housing stock. One of our walking groups actually came across an entire apartment complex that was being used for short-term rentals, Airbnb tourist, instead of regular housing in a downtown neighborhood. This is how Nevadans for the Common Good got involved in the housing stock problem. Hearing the stories of our neighbors allowed us to bring them into public testimonies with the city council, county commissioners, and a housing committee was then created, and this was made priority number 1 for Nevadans for the Common Good. We do research through individual members and as a collective because we're working on legislation to preserve existing housing, protect renter rights, and support all efforts for new, affordable housing units. I literally could do a whole Sunday on the levels of social and racial injustices just related to housing that are plentiful in our city. But here are a few quick examples of some housing nightmares.
I'm giving you a call this morning because I'm being evicted on June 5th. I'm looking for emergency rental assistance. I was dependent on CHAP to possibly assist, but they've not gotten back to me, and my children were going to get put out tomorrow.
I'm a disabled person with a Section 8 voucher for me and my family of 5. We've been looking since last September for someone to accept the voucher. We finally found a landlord that will accept it, but we can't afford the $2,000 security deposit. Can you afford to help us?
Hi, I was just calling regarding any shelter possibly or housing. We just are a family of 4. We have 2 minor children under the age of 6. We just got evicted from our house and we don't have a place to go.
Hello, I'm contacting you because I'm facing eviction with a court date on June 26th. I'm a mom of 2 very fragile children who both had surgery recently. I just became employed at CVS Health. My goal is financial stability, and after an award from CHAP for partial rent, I still owe a few months of back rent. CHAP would only pay for the month of my rent increase. I would appreciate any help available to me. Thanks.
The third way we support the mission of Nevadans for the Common Good is through house meetings. This allows anyone to meet and talk about a specific issue. Each person usually only gets 5 minutes to tell their story, and then those stories are collected together as information to research further, and then later used as testimonials. Last year's house meetings led to a mental health committee. In my professional life, I'm a mental health provider, but it was through Nevadans for the Common Good I got trained to use Narcan. That's because NCG had several parents of adults with addiction and mental health issues who were having to deal with the fear that their loved ones would overdose at a church function. And one of the people coming to the church for food, or perhaps one of the ones sleeping in their doorway, might overdose. The House meetings also allowed members to write their political representatives in support of the state's use of $988, which was set up now as a mental health crisis line hotline, and there are response teams throughout the state. Each member organization of Nevadans for the Common Good has a core team. That team organizes how the congregation will interface with NCG. For the core team, we look for people that are relational and teachable. You do not have to be an extrovert or have a specific type of ideology, nor do you have to be a social justice warrior. In fact, you don't have to be on the core team at all if you don't want. You can participate with Nevadans for the Common Good at any level you choose. You can give 2 hours every quarter or a few hours each month. You can participate in person by coming to meetings, or you can hang out behind the scenes or online helping with research and letter writing. The goal is to stir things up and identify what is important to our community and to help each other flourish. Again, the 2 current topic areas that have been voted on by membership are mental health and housing. However, the way Nevadans for the Common Good works, you can reactivate an old issue, like immigration, if you would want. You just have to also create a new one if you want as well, but you have to come, and bring that to the group and bring it up in discussion at maybe one of those house meetings. But this gets to a very common question that we get in interfaith work, which is, what about getting along with religious conservatives? You will be relieved to hear that this has not been a problem at Nevadans for the Common Good. Those congregations that have a hard time finding common ground have self-selected themselves out of the organization. And the rest of us are getting along. Obviously, there are a few topics we avoid, like abortion and gun rights, but people are polite and they keep their boundaries, so it works. This hour, we've thought about our interfaith work through Nevadans for the Common Good as another intersection in your life, an opportunity to get to know your religious neighbors while performing or representing how Unitarian Universalism acts on social and racial justice. This is where you can plug in. It's how you plug in to support our ministry in this neighborhood, in this local community. You can covenant to join this ministry.
We gather as a religious community to give each one of us a place where we can do the work of many. The offering supports the mission of the congregation to be a beacon of love and justice in the desert, and supports local organizations working to make our community a better place for all. Keep in mind, members, that for this contribution, for the congregational contribution of pledge money happens through a software called Breeze, and you can also use that program for one-time donations. For everybody here in the sanctuary, we will be passing around plates where you can deposit cash or checks. The offering this month is our own pastoral care committee. Trained pastoral care associates help other members and friends with their personal affairs, like home-cooked meals delivered, occasional rides to and from church or other locations, phone call checkups, and more. If you are interested in becoming a pastoral care associate, or if you need help, please reach out to Vernon Bell, Mary Barden, or Joanne Leovy. This offering is a spiritual practice of generosity that this congregation does as a whole each week. Please join us as a member or friend in this practice. The link to donate your offering is on the back of your order of service and in the chat on Zoom, and our ushers will pass around plates where you can donate. Now please join with me. With gratitude for the abundance in our own lives, we give for the life of this congregation and the benefit of the larger community.
I have an interfaith prayer for the world by Unitarian Universalist Claudine Oliva. In the spirit of love and compassion, let us pray. Spirit of life, gods of many names, be in our hearts and minds as we come together today to pray for our world. We come today as people of privilege, grateful for this blessing and hopeful for our future. Let us know that each from our own traditions comes today to lift our spirit in unity, knowing that we are part of an interconnected web of life. Let us acknowledge and embrace our oneness. We pray that we may be loving and able stewards of this world. We pray that we acknowledge our differences as we seek out our common ground, each of us working toward the good of all. We recognize that there is hurt and sorrow, deeds that confound us, and actions for which we can find no justification. Yet we also know that there is untold good, folks that work every day for the benefit of all people. Let us stand with them. We pray that we have the strength to recognize the inconvenience of our soul work and to overcome the inertia that invades us during these difficult times. We pray that while we recognize the occasional tiredness of our bones and in our hearts, that we call upon the strength of our higher power that we might be the best person that we are called to be. And yes, let us be the good we want to see in others. Let us work to be the change that we seek. As we renew these goals in our heart, let us say Amen.
Please join with me as we extinguish our chalice. We release that which was called with love and gratitude, and we extinguish the flame, but not our commitment to being a beacon in the desert. This burns brightly until we gather again.
Before we complete this service, we have 3 announcements today. The designation of our newest national monument, Bah Nuwavio Ita Kukvani, or Ancestral Footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument, is an opportunity to learn more about the Havasupai and Hopi people whose ancestral lands make up the monument. You can join our book study group, where we will be reading People of the Blue Water, starting September 17th, and then meeting again on the third Sundays in October and November. After the child dedication today, you are welcome to go with the first Sunday lunch bunch to Desert Pines Golf Course. This is where members and guests eat lunch together and solve the world's problems. See Betty Lacombe for directions. And the Stoles family will be celebrating the dedication of their new baby, Stella. Please remain in your seats after the postlude to welcome the newest member of our community. Even though it's summer, there are always more announcements and events, so you can head over to our website, uuclv.org, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Next Sunday, join us, our worship team, as we celebrate the annual Water Communion. This service formally kicks off the new church year. Bring a cup of water or two to share during this special service. If you have no water to share or forget to bring yours, we will have a supply here. Thank you for being with us today.